I'm James Bernard from Spectrasonics, and here at Synthplex in Burbank, we are showing the just released version 2.6 of Omnisphere. So in 2.6, which we introduced at NAMM, we have a number of new things that are happening. We have a number of new synths, as you can see here, that are supported by our hardware synth integration. There are over 65 synths now that are supported. I'm going to show you a few of them, some of the really exciting ones, and show you a little bit what's unique about each synth. We also have a number of new sounds that come with those new hardware profiles, about 600 new sounds that are included, and a new revamped Arpeggiator. So the Arpeggiator's got a number of really new and fun, exciting features that allow you to sort of play it and create some really interesting and inspiring motifs and ideas for your music. So let's start off. I'm kind of starting here with one of my favorite synths of all time, is the Juno 106. And not sure if a lot of people know, but actually the Juno 106 is one of the first MIDI synthesizers, and pretty unique in that at the time, a lot of these synthesizers weren't really sending any sort of information out when you were moving the knobs or touching the buttons. But the Juno 106 actually does send sysx information from the knobs and sliders when you're doing anything on the synth. And we read that information, and it allows us to control Omnisphere by just moving any of these sliders here. You can see right away the controller's happening. So if I'm playing the sound, so lots of fun. We can see very quickly. I can go on the synth and just start creating sounds or modifying sounds. And even, well, because of the way that the Juno 106 works, if I select different sounds on the preset patches, that information is actually sent as sysx. So whatever the preset was on the original Juno 106 gets sent over to Omnisphere as the sysx information, and it changes the parameters in Omnisphere and gives you a sound. It may not be exactly like the Juno 106, because that's not really what the idea is, but it's kind of fun and unique that you can get a patch. You could go in on the Juno 106, create a sound, store it to the Juno 106 memory, and when you select it, it will send that over to the Omnisphere, which is pretty cool. All right, so let's do this. I want to show you on this. We're going to go to the Arpeggiator. So with the Arpeggiator, what we've done now is we've added a number of new features. One of that is new types of play modes. So we've got these are the original play modes here, and then we've got join, spread and spread, spread or join, stairs up, stairs down, stairs up and down, stairs down and up. And this basically is taking the notes that I am playing on the keyboard and rearranging how they're going to be spit back out by the Arpeggiator. There's a really in-depth description of what each one of these play modes do. If you look up on the ref guide, which is available online, you'll get a good description of exactly what's happening with the notes as they're being spit out. And it's a good graphical representation of what's happening there. So I'm going to just select one, let's say like the spread mode. We'll turn the Arpeggiator on. We can change how the Arpeggiator plays, which is either in a loop, standard Arpeggiator way, chaos, which is sort of like random, so it sort of randomly selects how things are being played, and then the one shot, or once. So that's going to be useful for things like if I want to do like a flourish, or maybe a video game sort of like motif, I can do those sorts of things with the Arpeggiator now. So what I'm going to do is just going to play some chords here. So just like we would know. Okay, so what I want to do right now is go back to the Arpeggiator. I'm going to select one of the presets that are here. So with the Arpeggiator, we've got these new step modifiers. So let's choose one of these here. Let's go to chordal, and I think peppered stepper looks like a good one. So if you notice, when I do that, right above each one of the steps in the Arpeggiator, we now have these step modifiers. And these allow us to do things in the Arpeggiator which are pretty unique. We can, per step, decide to transpose steps up and down, sort of like a step sequencer, if you will. We can also do a per step slide, so getting things like that sort of classic sliding 303 type patterns, things like that, but deciding the length or the speed of the slide per step. We can also do something which is very unique for this Arpeggiator, which is the ability to take a chord. So if we're playing a sound that's polyphonic, like this particular sound, we can actually specify on certain steps of the arpeggiator different chord voicings and chord inversions. So without even being much of a great keyboard player, kind of like myself, I can actually have these really interesting sort of changes that are happening in the chords that I'm playing, and it will be this really interesting and organic way. So I'm gonna just play something very simple here using these chord voicings and this particular arpeggiator pattern that's here. So as you see, I'm really basic stuff here. I'm just, very rudimentary triads, but I'm getting all this really interesting stuff that's happening. And that's because all the step modifiers, as you can see here, we're taking different chord inversions, different voicings, and I can go up or down off of the root chord. So it's really flexible, really fun. The other thing that we have too, I'm gonna look over here to some of the stuff. Let's go to a baseline thing. Actually, we'll go to an ARP one. Okay, so on this one, I'll take this one. All right, so for this, what I'm gonna do is talk about the step modifier, which is the step dividers. So on this, I can actually take a step that's here, and I can decide to take that step and divide it up. So when it hits that step, instead of it playing just the one note, it could play 4 notes at that one point, or 3 notes, or 2 notes, and I can even have it either increase in velocity or decrease in velocity on that step. So I can get really interesting sort of stutters and things like that. I'm gonna change the speed a little bit on this so it's not quite so fast. So, makes me sound like I'm playing a lot better than I actually am, right? Okay, so that's a little bit of what's going on with the arpeggiator. There's a ton of really great new patterns that come with it that can be used as something to spring off new ideas or a basis for you to create and modify your own patterns. We can do that very quickly in the arpeggiator right now. When we click on it, we can go here and we can actually select changing the order of the steps themselves. So I can either rotate them to the left, it's going to shift things over that way, rotate them to the right, shuffle them around so I can actually kind of mix things up. I can even reverse them if I want as well, so I can flip the sort of pattern right around. So a lot of ways to sort of take something that we've created, even one of the presets, and modify them and customize them to the way you want to use them. And the last thing I want to talk about here is this capture mode. So what I was just playing there, let's just reverse that again and shuffle that. Okay, so for this, so let's say I like that pattern and I want to use that in my song. Now, the common thing with arpeggiators is that they're really fun to play, but a lot of times when it comes to the point of actually using it in your production, it becomes a little more tricky, because a lot of times to capture that exact moment and the way it sounds when you're playing it as MIDI information can be tricky. So a lot of times you're left with the option of like recording it as audio, but now you're married to the sound that you're using, and maybe you don't really want that sound after you put it into a track, you want to change it up a bit. We have this new mode called capture. And with capture mode, I can specify exactly how many bars I want to capture of what I'm going to play. So I'm going to go to 1 bar. So it's now waiting for me to play notes. So let's say when I've done that, it's now captured that, and I can now drag that MIDI file over to a DAW, onto my desktop, wherever I want to use it. And everything that was played, including all of the step dividers, slides, chords, all of that exists as MIDI data, which can be edited and modified and used on any sound. Could either be not even Omnisphere sound, if I want to use it to control some other MIDI synth, or even a Eurorack synth if I have a CV to MIDI or MIDI to CV conversion. Okay, so very flexible, really cool tool to be able to use to sort of inspire new ideas and capture the moment, the essence of what's happening in the arpeggiator. Okay, so we're gonna move over from this point now. I wanna kind of shift around, and we're gonna show some of the other synths that we've got here. Some of the stuff we were showing during the NAMM show, that one of them right here is one of our favorites, the D50 classic synth that Eric was responsible for all the sound design and making this synth the amazing synth that it was. Using the D50 with the PG-1000 programmer, you will be able to control Omnisphere using this. And as we've done with any of the other synths that are supported by hardware synth integration, we've captured the sort of flavor, the essence of the D50 in Omnisphere, which means that now you're going to have a lot of those classic, iconic sounds from the D50 right in Omnisphere. We've got a lot of samples that were from the original synth itself. So things like, you know, this type of sound. So very, very simple, very sort of iconic 80s type sound. And you have the controller here, the PG-1000, where you can go in and start modifying envelopes, cutoff frequency. These are kind of rare, kind of hard to find, but if you happen to be lucky enough to have one, you've got all that full control over Omnisphere using the PG-1000. And there are some sort of very famous types of sounds here. Let's say like the classic soundtrack, for example. We all know that sound, right? But of course, it sounds a lot more sort of updated, modern. It's got a lot more depth to it because obviously now we're listening to Omnisphere. We're not listening to the D50. Everything that you're hearing that I'm doing here is not the synth, it's Omnisphere, and you're using the synth to control it. Okay, so let's move over a little bit more here. This is a synth that I think we all have probably about 5 of these in our collection, maybe the Andromeda, right? These are very popular synth. I'm obviously joking. These are rare. This is sort of like the end-all, be-all of synth that I think any synth nut would love to have in their collection, but really rare, beautiful synth, very, very powerful synth. Lots of controls that we have. Using this with Omnisphere, we've got that sort of Andromeda flavor, and I'm going to select some sound here. So I'm going to play some sounds here using the Andromeda and kind of give you an idea of what this sounds like using Omnisphere. This is what we're hearing, and the Andromeda to control the sounds. Big, angry synth, all right? I'm not even going to get too much into all the details. Lots of parameters. Everything works. Everything allows you to control the sound in Omnisphere. So, a fun one. This is one that we didn't show at NAMM, but we were working on it, and so we're kind of excited to show this. This is the MKS-80, the Super Jupiter, and using the MPG-80 Super Jupiter programmer, you now have the ability to control Omnisphere from that. So let's get a nice big sort of MKS-80 pad here. Really nice, and we'll just do a little filter sweep. All right, lots of fun. Again, this is also another one of those sort of rare birds to find, the PG-80 as well, but if you have one, now you can use it to control Omnisphere as well using hardware synth integration. And the last one I want to show you, one of my personal faves, is actually the first synth I ever had personally in my collection and got me to sort of understand modular synthesis, which is the MS-20. Now this is not an MS-20, this is actually an MS-20 IC. Korg made a software some years ago, and this was a controller. It's a USB controller. You can see on the back here, strictly just USB out. So there's no actual audio, anything on this. This is just using this as a controller. So the unique thing about this particular controller is that obviously, as you can see, it's got patch points, right? So we would be remiss to not take advantage of those patch points. And you would think, well, okay, how do we do that, right? This is a semi-modular synthesizer. Omnisphere is not necessarily a semi-modular synthesizer. You don't think of it as such, but in actuality, you do have all these modulation routing sources and destinations in Omnisphere that you can use when you're using the software. While having these patch points that have MIDI controller numbers assigned to them, I can patch Omnisphere. So I can take this synth, and I'm going to patch out, let's do something fun. Let's take this sample and hold here. I'm going to take that and patch that out just quickly to, let's say, the pitch. And we'll turn that up here. Right? Super R2-D2 noises, right? Now, what's interesting about how the support is on the MS-20 IC with Omnisphere is that I can actually do some multing, which means I can actually take one source and patch it to multiple destinations, and Omnisphere creates a new routing for each time we do that in the mod matrix, which is crazy. So we're gonna do this. We're actually gonna patch multiple sources and multiple destinations in Omnisphere using cables, okay? So I'm gonna, again, take that sample and hold. I'm gonna patch it into the pitch again. Now I'm also gonna patch it from that output into the low pass filter cutoff, right? Right? Crazy. I'm patching Omnisphere. As you can see right here, when I do that and I patch a cable, we get a routing that's created in Omnisphere. So pretty crazy stuff. These are not too difficult to find these days. Maybe now they will be after we've just shown this, but really cool support that we've got for this particular controller. And again, everything you're hearing has been Omnisphere. Right? These are hardware synths that we're using, our hardware synth integration to control Omnisphere. So that's Omnisphere 2.6, just a little bit what we've got. If you do a quick once around the booth, you can see we've got just a few synths here. I think we brought 37 or so here to the show. So just an example of some of the breadth of what we've got for hardware synth integration, okay?